You're online, it's 11 p.m., and you're staring at a $200 jacket you definitely don't need, but absolutely want. Then you see it, that little green button. Pay in 4 interest-free payments of $50. Interest-free, the jacket's yours, you only pay $50 today, and the rest is future use problem. Except 2 weeks later, you forgot. You were busy and even had 3 other pay in 4 purchases running that you also forgot about. And here's the thing that should terrify you. 41% of people using these apps missed at least one payment last year. That's not a small minority making mistakes. That's nearly half the user base feeding a fee machine that was designed to look like a favor. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about how companies have found creative new ways to make debt feel like a lifestyle hack. If you've ever used Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm, or tapped that pay later button without really thinking about it, make sure to hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Because today we're breaking down why buy now, pay later might be the most dangerous financial trap nobody's talking about. Now, before we dive in, let me be crystal clear about something. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. What I am is someone who's watched the buy now, pay later industry explode from a $2 billion niche in 2019 to over $127 billion in 2026. That's not growth. That's a financial wildfire. And when something grows that fast, someone is making a lot of money. Spoiler alert, it's not you. Let's start with the numbers, because when I tell people what's actually happening in this space, they usually assume I'm exaggerating. The buy now, pay later market in America hit over $107 billion in 2025. By 2031, it's projected to reach $258 billion. We're talking about a payment method that barely existed a decade ago now, processing more money annually than the GDP of most countries. Over 86 million Americans now use BNPL services. 86 million, that's roughly 1 in 4 adults. And the growth isn't slowing down. Holiday 2025 alone saw shoppers drop $10.1 billion through BNPL between November and Cyber Monday. That's a 9% increase from the year before. But here's where the numbers get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying from a financial planning perspective. According to the Federal Reserve, nearly 24% of BNPL users have made a late payment. Well, that's up from 18% just a year earlier. The trajectory is going the wrong direction. And a Motley Fool study found that 29% of users have missed a payment at some point. Among Gen Z users, that number climbs even higher. But wait, there's more. 41% of BNPL users report having made a late payment in the past year, according to LendingTree. That's up from 34% the year before. And here's the kicker, only 47% of BNPL users actually plan their payments ahead of time. The rest either track loosely or, and this is a direct quote, lose track altogether. Let me say that again. More than half the people using these services don't actually know how much they owe or when they owe it. Now, you might be thinking, well, Nick, at least these are interest-free loans. That's better than a credit card, right? And if that's what you're thinking, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's exactly what they want you to think. Here's the thing about buy now, pay later that the companies definitely don't want you to understand. The interest-free part is only true for short-term pay in 4 loans and only if you pay on time. Miss a payment, Afterpay charges $8 or 25% of the transaction, whichever is less. Miss one payment on a $50 purchase, that's $8 gone. Klarna generated $472 million in what one competitor called junk fees in 2024 alone. That's 7% of their total revenue coming from things like late fees, reminder fees, and snooze fees. Yes, you can pay a fee to delay your payment. They've literally monetized procrastination. And those longer term financing options, Affirm charges up to 36% APR on loans longer than pay in FOC 4. That's not interest free, that's credit card territory with better marketing, but late fees are just the beginning. The real cost of BNPL isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in behavior change. Here's how the psychology works, and this is where it gets really insidious. When you see a $200 item with a pay in 4 option, your brain doesn't register it as $200. It registers it as $50. This is called the pain of paying phenomenon. Splitting a cost over time literally reduces the psychological discomfort of spending money. Studies show that consumers spend significantly more when BNPL is an option. One analysis found that businesses offering BNPL see a 27% increase in sales. That's not because people suddenly need 27% more stuff. It's because the payment method tricks their brains into thinking everything is affordable. You might be thinking, but Nick, I always pay on time. I'm not one of those people. And if that's what you're thinking, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you're exactly who they're counting on. Because even if you never miss a payment, you're still spending more than you would without the option. Remember that 27% sales increase for merchants? That's coming from somewhere. It's coming from your wallet. Let me paint you a picture of how this actually plays out. You're shopping online, you need a new pair of running shoes, budget $80. You find a pair you like for $120. Normally you'd close the tab and keep looking, but then you see it. 4 payments of $30. Suddenly $120 feels like $30. You buy the shoes. While you're there, you notice some running socks, $40, or 4 payments of $10. Why not? And maybe some workout shorts, another $60 or $15 today. You leave the site having spent $220 instead of $80, but it doesn't feel like $220. It feels like $58 because that's all that left your account today. Now, multiply this across every shopping experience for an entire year. This is how people end up with 60% of BNPL users reporting they've had multiple loans at once. And nearly 1 in 4 users have had 3 or more active BNPL loans simultaneously. It's like being slowly pecked to death by ducks. No single payment is dangerous, but there are a lot of ducks. But here's where the story takes a turn that honestly sounds like something from a financial dystopia novel. People aren't just using BNPL for electronics and clothing anymore. They're financing groceries. Like 25% of BNPL users now use these services to buy groceries. That's up from 14% just a year ago. 1/3 of Gen Z BNPL users have financed their supermarket trips. Think about that for a second. We've normalized going into debt for milk and bread, and it gets worse. You're right, you can now use Klarna on DoorDash. You can literally finance your takeout burrito. 4 payments of $3.75 for a meal that'll be digested before your first installment is due. When the partnership was announced, one personal finance expert called it a dystopian indictment of late-stage capitalism. Another said, if you need a loan to buy a damn burger, you're not the customer, you're the product. When financial experts start using the word dystopian to describe a payment method, maybe we should pay attention. Here's why financing food is such a massive red flag. BNPL was originally marketed as a way to spread out large purchases. A new couch, a laptop, things that cost enough to justify payment planning, but groceries, a burrito, these aren't big ticket items. They're necessities and impulse purchases. When people start financing necessities, it means they can't afford necessities. And when people start financing impulse purchases, it means they've completely lost the connection between spending and actual money. This brings us to what I call the BNPL debt spiral, and it works like this. Step 1, you use BNPL for a legitimate purpose, maybe a medical bill or an unexpected car repair. Makes sense. Interest-free financing for an emergency. Step 2, because that first experience was painless, you use it again, this time for something less essential. A new gaming console, some clothes, still manageable. Step 3, you now have multiple BNPL loans running, but since each one is only $25 or $50 per payment, it doesn't feel like much. Step 4, money gets tight one month. You have a choice. Skip a BNPL payment and face a late fee, or use BNPL to buy groceries and other essentials to free up cash. You choose option B, step 5. You now have even more BNPL loans. The payments start stacking. You're not managing purchases anymore. You're managing debt. Step 6. You miss a payment, then another. Late fees accumulate. Your interest-free loans are no longer interest-free. Step 7. You're trapped in a cycle where you're constantly paying for things you bought months ago while taking on new debt to afford current expenses. This is loan stacking, and it's becoming epidemic. 63% of BNPL borrowers have more than one loan going at any given time, and because these loans often don't report to credit bureaus, there's no way for lenders to know you've got 5 other BNPL loans when you apply for a 6th. You can rack up thousands in phantom debt that doesn't show up on your credit reports until, that is, you default. And then it absolutely does. They've essentially invented financial quicksand that looks like a shortcut. Here's what that actually feels like day to day. It feels like checking your bank account every morning, wondering which $25 is going to disappear today. It feels like that mini heart attack when you see a payment notification and can't remember what it's for. It feels like keeping a mental calendar of 8 different due dates while trying to remember your mom's birthday. It feels like avoiding your email because there might be another missed payment notice sitting there. It feels like wanting to buy something you actually need, but hesitating because you're not sure if you can handle another set of payments on top of the ones you've already lost track of. Here's the math that most people never bothered to calculate. Let's say you're an average BNPL user. You've got 3 active loans running simultaneously. One's for a $400 TV, one's for $200 in clothes, and one's for $150 in random stuff. That's $750 in total debt split across 12 different payment dates over the next 2 months. At any given time, you've got payments coming due every few days. Miss one, and you're looking at $8 to $15 in late fees. Miss a couple, and suddenly your interest-free purchases cost you 10% more. But here's the really insidious part. While you're managing these 12 payment dates, you're still shopping because the payments are small, because everything feels affordable, because the BNPL button is right there at checkout. Before you know it, you've got 5 active loans, then 8, each one individually manageable, collectively. A financial nightmare. The average BNPL user now spends about $244 per month on these services. That's up 21% from just a year ago. For people in their 20s and 30s who are the heaviest users, that money could be going into retirement accounts, emergency funds, or paying down other debt. Instead, it's servicing a constant rotation of small loans for stuff they could have just waited to buy. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that BNPL users are more likely to have subprime or deep subprime credit scores. They carry higher balances on other unsecured debt, an average of $871 more in credit card debt and $450 more in personal loans compared to non-BNPL users. They're not using BNPL as a sophisticated cash management tool. They're using it because they can't afford to pay for things outright. More than half of BNPL users admit they've used the service to make purchases they otherwise couldn't afford. That's not financing, that's living beyond your means with extra steps. But perhaps the most concerning trend is what this is doing to an entire generation's relationship with money. Yeah, 50% of Gen Z and millennials say they prefer BNPL over credit cards. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. Credit cards charge interest, BNPL often doesn't. But here's what they're missing. Credit cards, for all their problems, have guardrails. There's a credit check, there's a spending limit, there's a single monthly payment date. There are robust consumer protections for disputes and fraud. BNPL has almost none of these. The approval process is instant and nearly universal. There's no unified spending limit. Payment dates are scattered across the calendar, and until very recently, there were basically zero regulatory protections. We've essentially given young people unlimited access to debt while removing all the friction that historically made people think twice before borrowing. And let me tell you what that means long term. When you're 22 and you've been financing everything from concert tickets, yes, 60% of Coachella attendees use BNPL for their tickets, to your weekly grocery run, you're training your brain that debt is normal, that purchases don't need to align with income, that you can always worry about paying for things later. This isn't building financial skills, it's building financial dependency. It's like getting a gym membership for your wallet, except instead of getting stronger, you just pay fees for not showing up. But here's what makes this truly insidious. The BNPL companies know exactly what they're doing. They've spent millions researching the psychology of spending. They know that splitting payments reduces psychological pain. They know that instant approval creates impulse buying. They know that scattered due dates cause people to lose track of what they owe. Like, none of this is accidental. The button is bright green for a reason. The math showing $25 today instead of $100 total is calculated for a reason. The nearly zero approval requirements exist for a reason. They're not offering you a convenient payment option. They're exploiting cognitive biases to make you spend more than you would otherwise. And the businesses offering BNPL, they're paying extra for the privilege. BNPL providers charge merchants 4 to 6% per transaction compared to about 2.5% for credit cards. Why would a business pay double the transaction fee? Because they know BNPL increases sales volume by 20-30%. Because they know customers with BNPL options spend more per transaction. Because they know the psychological manipulation is worth the cost. You're not the customer, you're the product. The merchants are the customers. BNPL companies are selling them access to your wallet, and you're paying for it through behavior change you don't even notice. So let me give you permission to do something that might feel radical in 2026. You can just not use it. You can look at that pay in 4 button and choose to close the tab instead. You can decide that if you can't afford something today, you'll wait until you can. That's not financial failure. That's not being left behind. That's recognizing that a system designed to make you spend more isn't actually doing you any favors. The BNPL companies have spent millions convincing you that paying for things immediately is old-fashioned, that splitting everything into installments is just how smart people shop now. But you're not failing at modern finance by refusing to participate. You're opting out of a game that was rigged before you sat down. So here's my actual advice, and I want to be practical here because just saying don't use BNPL isn't helpful if you're already in the cycle. First, if you're currently using BNPL, run the real numbers, count your loans right now. Open every app, check every email, figure out exactly how many active loans you have and when each payment is due. Most people who do this are shocked by the number. You can't fix a problem you don't understand. Second, stop the bleeding. Commit to not opening any new BNPL loans until you've paid off the existing ones. I know that sounds obvious, but the entire BNPL ecosystem is designed to make you keep adding loans. You have to consciously opt out. Third, consolidate your mental accounting. If you have $300 in scattered BNPL loans, treat it like $300 in debt, and not 3 easy payments here and 4 easy payments there. It's debt. Label it as such in your brain. Fourth, and this is the most important one, if you can't afford something without BNPL, you can't afford it. Period. The pay in 4 option isn't making things affordable. It's making them feel affordable. There's a massive difference. And fifth, if you're using BNPL for groceries or other necessities, that's a 5-alarm fire warning that your budget needs serious attention. That's not a payment strategy. That's a crisis being managed with more debt. Here's what ties this all together. The buy now, pay later industry has convinced an entire generation that debt is convenience, that financing everything is normal, that the pain of paying is something to be avoided rather than respected. But that pain exists for a reason. It's your brain's way of making you think twice before spending money. It's the friction that keeps you from buying things you don't need with money you don't have. When you remove that friction, you don't become financially free. You become financially untethered. Yeah, spending without connection to earning, consuming without connection to affording. The companies offering these services aren't your friends. They're not trying to help you manage your finances. They're trying to maximize the amount of money that flows through their systems. And they found that the best way to do that is to make debt feel like nothing. But debt is never nothing. Whether you pay it in one lump sum or 4 easy installments, you're still exchanging future money for present purchases. You're still making a commitment that constrains your future options. You're still building a relationship with borrowing that will shape how you approach money for decades. The next time you see that pay in 4 button, I want you to do something radical. Consider whether you'd still buy this thing if you had to hand over the full amount in cash right now. Ask yourself if you're buying this because you want it or because the payment structure makes it feel free. Because here's the thing about buy now, pay later that nobody talks about. You always pay later. The only question is whether you're paying with money, with fees, with stress, or with a relationship with debt that follows you for the rest of your financial life. Sometimes the smartest financial move isn't finding a more creative way to afford something. It's recognizing that if you need to finance it, maybe you don't need it